A strong box.
Game Freak is no stranger to hype, and even less so when it comes to falling short of expectations. When you're presented with the ruined world of Beast of Reincarnation, its latest and arguably most expensive third-party effort yet, there are fears that it all buckles under the massive regions, involved combat, and weighty themes. As intriguing as all of this appeared in the marketing lead up to launch, it's all in the execution. Now, I won't claim that this is a groundbreaking title in the action RPG or action-adventure genre, but even with the faint similarities with Nier's mood, the parry-heavy combat of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and the command-based tactics and elemental exploitation that wouldn't be out of place in a Pokemon game, Beast of Reincarnation is the perfect example of meeting expectations. Perhaps even surpassing a few in my book, though it's not without some stumbles for sure.
I don't think that's the only reason. The golems have lived for hundreds of years. Their souls can no longer withstand the weight of time. Even those of flesh and blood aren't immune. As long as the soul exists, it decays.
Set in 4026, nature has overrun civilization in Japan, and everything is in ruins, with survivors struggling against the blight. You control Emma, a purifier, tasked by the capital with slaying the titular beast. But unlike the others, she's on a journey to slay the Nushi first, absorbing their strains to make her more formidable against the beast. She's joined by Brad, who pilots the Cleanse Walker that travels from region to region, and Kagura, a survivor from a previous colony. Then there's Violet, who's always been around and only Emma can see. Will she probably, most likely become important later? Well, that's for you to find out. It's a lot to take in, especially with how Game Freak starts in media res before going back to where it all truly begins in Ugauchi. Occasionally, you'll play through flashbacks, which show how Emma met Ku, her curious, malefactor companion, and how she begins traveling with Brad and Kagura. These sections feel a little awkward because even though they're glorified tutorials, you already received instruction at the start and had more than enough time to learn the mechanics in the first region. Nevertheless, even before the plot begins to pick up and maintains a refreshingly tight pace, even with the game's overall length, Beast of Reincarnation's atmosphere immediately pulls you in. The first zone's countryside and rice fields feel wonderfully authentic, despite the wreckage of walkers and manic golems running around. It also presents an extensive range of verticality, whether you're pursuing weapons or unearthing sub-cities. The sense of exploration comes across seamless as well. Maybe Ku will alert you to nearby valuables, increasing your max stim packs, or to go to a strongbox and suddenly you're happening upon an enemy camp and asking a keeper golem where you find some sweet seedlings. Each region feels aesthetically unique. While Ugauchi is more of a traditional Japanese countryside, the massive valley between Kanto's walls, leading into an intricate underground network with waterfalls and wreckage, is a spectacle in its own right. I felt compelled at nearly every single turn to see what awaited next, and for much of my opening hours, Beast of Reincarnation did not disappoint. While later regions still feed into this addictive loop, ensuring that every charm, vegetable, and recipe book feels worthwhile, they pare things back a tad in favor of more unique layouts. One such section focuses more on platforming, navigating broken pipes and cliffsides while avoiding death from turrets. Of course, the focus narrows further in the last few chapters, and even if it's for the sake of the narrative, they make the first few regions shine all the more in comparison when it comes to free-form exploration. Regardless though, it's still great to run around in these environments, taking in the sights and the sounds even if you occasionally get caught in them. Game Freak foresaw Emma floating, caught on something or the other, and thus resets your position nearby if you cannot escape, which is nice. It'd be nicer if it didn't happen so often, but at least it doesn't happen a lot in combat.
Ku, there's an enemy.
Throughout all of this, you're slowly learning about Emma, A blight-stained who's shunned by most of humanity and considered emotionless. And yet, the slow process by which she starts to learn about things like love, happiness, and even joking around can be quite endearing. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the dialogue is always on point, especially in English. For those conversations between Emma and Brad, where she turns things around on him, they can be humorous, and there's a nice balance between cute and awkward when she interacts with Ku. The writing does a good job overall of building intrigue while slowly unraveling information about the world, the Nushi, and the capital, and the mysterious beast at the heart of all of it. But there are other times where Emma's conversations with Kagura can feel one note, and the chemistry compared to everyone else, especially Violet, just feels lacking at times. Of course, the same goes for the facial animations and the cutscene direction. I'm not expecting AAA cinematics from Game Freak, but the lack of movement and odd cuts and even reused animations in specific circumstances really stick out. There's also one scene where Emma uses her hair to retrieve her sword, and I can't describe it as anything less than low budget. That was thankfully the only really egregious example, but the lackluster facial animations remain prevalent throughout conversations, bringing them down ever so slightly. Now, a note on the English voice acting, it's not bad, but Japanese voice acting is far superior. Still, at least Game Freak has an eye for the little things, whether it's the attention to detail in environments, especially the hidden lore, which suddenly makes a lot more sense within the context of the plot, or Ku's gaze following Emma as she walks around. Combat is the core appeal, and arguably what will endear Beast of Reincarnation to most players. You've already seen how the parrying and the bloom arts work, and I can confirm that they feel very good. The satisfying clash of blades on a successful parry contrasts well with a simple block, and empowering a sword to unleash poisoned lightning or flaming projectiles is great. I was also surprised at how fun ranged combat could be. Now sure, the bow is more for long-ranged damage rather than the heat of combat, but watch the crossbow's bolts buzzing around like Yondu's Yaka arrow between multiple enemies and tell me that that is not satisfying. Gaining Nushi skills and intertwining them in the usual hack-and-slash combos, or finding ways to exploit grapple points generated in combat, be it to slam down with authority or fire off some shots in midair, is also extremely satisfying.
Go.
Even if the weapon upgrading and build crafting can feel simplistic at first, there is some fun synergies to be had, and a use for almost every single skill when combined with different spirit stones, which confer unique passives to Emma, and mods for Ku's bloom arts. And even if you're not a fan of parrying or how closely it's tied to building fluorescent points to use Ku's abilities, there are plenty of other avenues that accentuate these systems without feeling gimmicky or tacked on. Now, I do wish that there were more enemy variety though, especially towards the latter half of the game. Instead of presenting new threats, Game Freak puts a few spins on the old ones, like invisibility or those annoying archers who won't flinch from attacks and fire 3 times in a row. Your mileage will vary on how effective those are, but the same philosophy affects many of the boss fights as well, though at least they're each unique. One Nushi, for example, loved to run away, pelting you from afar as a fadeaway tactic, so it became an exercise in anticipation and knowing when to slow everything down and initiate overdrive to lay on the hurt. The lowest point, as is often the case in many hack-and-slash titles, is the camera. At best, it will occasionally clip through the Nushi's head, thus making things awkward, especially in the middle of an overdrive, and you cannot target any other body part. At worst, in confined spaces, it's difficult to anticipate some attacks, while the constant back and forth swinging of the camera becomes headache-inducing. Again, not a deal breaker during about 70% of the battles, but difficult to ignore in that remaining 30%. On base PS5, you can expect a solid 60 FPS in performance mode for the most part. In the areas with water, lighting, shadows, and more, things start to noticeably falter. Foliage pop-in is also common, and the level of detail over long distances suffers. I know it's all for the sake of maintaining performance, but it does dull the otherwise superb art direction. Now, while I wouldn't put Beast of Reincarnation at the top of my recommendations for 2026, it is still a pretty good action-adventure title and easily one of Game Freak's best titles yet. Even amid all of the hurdles and speed bumps, it's both a road trip to remember and one that doesn't overstay its welcome. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.